Operations have been suspended at Ukraine's Izmail port on the Danube after a Russian drone strike. Neighbouring Romania's president says Russian attacks on Ukraine's port facilities along the Danube River are unacceptable. Russian forces carried out drone attacks in Odesa on Tuesday night. Office buildings as well as grain silos and warehouses were damaged. The area is a vital route for Kiev to export grain at a time when many other routes have been closed off. The Kremlin intensified attacks in the Odesa region after withdrawing from the UN-brokered grain deal last month. That had allowed ships carrying Ukrainian grain safe passage through the Black Sea. Grain can also be transported overland by truck or train, but the rail option through Poland and other EU members is hampered by various countries using a different track size from Ukraine. Another route is through the congested Black Sea port of Constanta in Romania. That's time-consuming and costly. So is shipping on the Danube River and its network of canals. In a moment, we'll go live to Yulia Shapovalova in Moscow. But first, let's go to Sinem Kosoğlu. Actually, let's go first instead to Yulia Shapovalova in Moscow. We'll go to Sinem in a bit. So, Yulia, first of all, what are Russian officials saying about the suggestions coming from Turkey of the possibility of a return of Russia to a new grain deal?
Yes, of course, we can discuss the telephone talks between the two presidents, between President Putin and President Erdogan. And indeed, the presidents discussed the possible resumption of the grain deal, which allows for the safe export of Ukrainian grain from its Black Sea ports. Mr. Putin said that Russia, as a reliable partner, was ready to supply its grain free of charge to countries in need. He confirmed his readiness to return to it as soon as the West fulfills its obligations towards Russia and Russia's conditions are met. And here's what his press secretary Dmitry Peskov had to say about that.
Россия и президент Путин это повторял уже 100 раз. Россия готова незамедлительно вернуться к самой сделке, не только переговорам, но и самой сделке. Незамедлительно готовы сделать. Просто сделка должна быть реализована в той части, которая касается Российской Федерации. До сих пор этого сделано не было, как вы знаете.
And there's been quite a bit of Russian targeting of Ukrainian ports. Do they think that this strategy is working?
Well, actually, by targeting Ukrainian seaports, Russia shows it's being serious about keeping its promise after the grain deal withdrawal to consider all ships on their way to and from Ukrainian ports potential carriers of military cargo. On the one hand, Russia targets the port infrastructure in and around Odesa, saying it destroys foreign military hardware coming from abroad for the Ukrainian army, while the Ukrainian side says Russia wants to strangle Ukraine, not only militarily, but also economically, by not allowing it to export its grain, something that was bringing Ukraine tens of billions of dollars in profit in the past. In general, this is part of Russia's global strategy aimed at destroying Ukraine's infrastructure. It's all part of a plan to force Ukraine to surrender.
Thanks very much to Yulia there. Let's continue this now, though, with Sinem Kosoğlu. She joins us from Istanbul, and there was some talk about, from Turkish officials, about a return to a new grain deal. What can you tell us about that, Sinem?
Well, Sami, yes, Turkish President's office today said that President Erdogan, during his phone call with his Russian counterpart, emphasized the importance of Moscow's return to the grain deal. And yes, Moscow has been sending green signals. However, it is not clear whether there is really a hope or not, because this attack in Odesa region to the Izmail port just happened over the night. And the phone talk between two presidents was already planned, because we heard from Kremlin that this phone talk was already going to happen on Wednesday. So, of course, both sides know how to speak to each other. Both leaders know how to do diplomacy together, or can leave aside the differences when there is a mutual interest to work on. But of course, apparently there is some time for this return to the grain deal. But this is what Turkey hopes, because for Turkey, it is not only a diplomatic win for President Erdogan, but also the safety of Black Sea is very important. As long as this Black Sea grain deal initiative continues, as President Erdogan considers this grain deal as a peace bridge, everything will be fine for Turkey. But it seems President Putin also wants to keep the door open for his commitments to the African countries, because last week we saw that in St. Petersburg, Russia-Africa summit was held, and Russian president pledged that he would be sending grains to the African countries. Yes, there is a hope for the extension of the grain deal. When and how is still unclear, Sami.
And that's Sinem Konsalı reporting from Istanbul. Ukraine urgently needs more medical supplies as intensified fighting on the front lines results in more soldiers being wounded. Medics who depend on donations say they regularly receive supplies that are unusable. Sometimes donations are stolen. Step Varson reports from Kharkiv.
Combat medic Danish Midov shows us a macabre collection he calls the Museum of Tourniquets That Kill. Tourniquets donated to frontline medics in Ukraine to make a difference between life and death.
Unfortunately, these tourniquets are useless. They cannot stop the critical bleeding, they will not work, they will not save their life. Some of them are made in USA, some of them, this one was made in Israel. Like I've taken it on the front line from the Israeli volunteer. I've taken it, said, give this one to me, and I will give you normal one.
Jan Chekmarov just returned from the front line, where he says soldiers urgently need equipment to operate blood and evacuation vehicles.
It's very necessary because there are a lot of soldiers coming to our stabilization points. The Russians are storming our position, and they are very good at using drones.
A volunteer for a group called Ukrainian Fighters is suing first aid kits sent from Poland before soldiers can use them. Not all medical donations are reaching the front lines. The authorities are currently investigating the disappearance of first aid kits worth $1 million sent by the US. Since the start of the war, several officials, including the Deputy Defense Minister, have lost their jobs after corruption involving support for the military was uncovered. President Zelenskyy recently said he had no more tolerance for officials who would jeopardize Ukraine's anti-corruption drive needed for EU admission. Aware of the risks, relief centers like this one register all donations.
I think that corruption is very bad, and corruption with medical supplies is the worst thing that can happen. Moreover, this is the moment when human life is very, very valuable.
With fighting intensifying, human lives are increasingly at stake. Combat medics urge the government not only demand more weapons, but focus on medical supplies too.
If we will not provide the best medical help to our warriors, we will lose this war. Because if all our wounded soldiers will die, who will be fighting?
To save lives, well-functioning tourniquets are badly needed, like the ones Danish Midov shows us. Step Varson, Al Jazeera, Kharkiv, Ukraine.